Imagine a peaceful Sunday morning disrupted by an act of terror. In the heart of Sydney, a city known for its sparkling harbors and iconic opera house, an unthinkable incident unfolded. A church, a place of worship and sanctuary, became the stage of a horrifying act of violence. A knife-wielding teenager stormed the building, launching an attack on a bishop and his congregants. This wasn't a scene from a movie, nor a nightmare one could wake up from. It was a chilling reality that shook the city to its core. The authorities were quick to respond, arriving at the scene to apprehend the young attacker. But the ordeal was far from over. As the news of the arrest spread, the bishop's followers, shocked and angered by the incident, clashed with the police. Tensions flared, adding another layer of complexity to an already tragic event. But what was the motive behind this act of terror? According to Australian authorities, it was religious extremism that drove the teenager to commit such a heinous act. And as if this wasn't horrifying enough, it came just 2 days after another mass stabbing incident in the city. But unlike this church attack, the previous incident wasn't linked to terrorism. Instead, it was the act of a man suffering from mental health issues who targeted women in a fatal stabbing spree. In the face of such violence, the city of Sydney was left reeling. Fear, confusion and grief swept through the streets as people struggled to make sense of the senseless. As the news spread across the globe, the US Embassy issued a security alert, and the Prime Minister of Australia took to the podium, emphasizing unity and condemning violence. In the wake of terror, a city struggles to find answers. What led to these incidents? How can they be prevented? And most importantly, how does a city heal from such wounds? As we delve deeper into this story, we hope to shed some light on these questions. But for now, Sydney mourns, grappling with the aftermath of an unthinkable incident. But what drives a person to such extreme measures? This question echoes in our minds as we try to comprehend the horrifying act that took place in a church in Western Sydney. The Australian authorities have deemed this a terrorist incident, an act motivated by religious extremism. But what does that mean, exactly? To understand this, we must delve into the concept of religious extremism. It's not about faith or spirituality. Instead, it's a perversion of these noble ideas, twisted into a justification for violence and hatred. It's a dangerous ideology that convinces its followers that their acts of terror are righteous, that they are serving a higher cause. In the case of the Sydney church attack, the perpetrator was a male teenager, a young mind susceptible to manipulation, led astray by this twisted ideology. This teenager turned to violence, believing in the righteousness of his actions, driven by the fervor of religious extremism. The investigation revealed that the motive behind his actions was not personal grudge or revenge but a warped belief system. It's a terrifying thought, isn't it? That a person can be so deeply indoctrinated, so utterly consumed by a hateful ideology, that they would resort to such extreme violence. This is a stark reminder of the danger posed by religious extremism. It's not just a threat to our physical safety but also to the fabric of our societies. It breeds division, hatred, and violence. It turns places of worship, places of peace and community, into scenes of terror. It's important to note that this is not a reflection on religion itself. Most people of faith are peaceful, compassionate individuals, but when religion is perverted into an excuse for violence, when it's used to justify acts of terror, that's when it becomes a problem. That's when it becomes religious extremism. This incident, this act of terror, serves as a chilling reminder of how extremism can breed violence. We must remain vigilant, aware, and united in our fight against this threat. We must strive to promote understanding, tolerance, and peace in our societies. Only then can we hope to prevent such atrocities from happening in the future. A chilling reminder of how extremism can breed violence. Just when Sydney was reeling from one attack, another one struck. Imagine, if you will, a city just beginning to come to terms with a horrifying act of violence. The wounds are still fresh, the shock still palpable, and before the grief can even start to subside, another wave of horror crashes down. This was the reality for Sydney, Australia, in the span of just 2 days. Now let's turn back the clock a bit. 2 days before the church attack, another mass stabbing incident shook the city to its core. The attacker was a man grappling with mental health issues, and his victims were women. This was not an act of religious extremism, not a terrorist attack in the traditional sense, but it was still a horrifying act of violence that left 6 innocent people dead. So what drove this man to commit such a violent act? The answer, in simple terms, is mental health. This is not to say that everyone with mental health issues is a potential threat, far from it. But in this case, the attacker's struggles with his mental health led him down a dark and dangerous path. This man, whose name we won't mention out of respect for the victims, targeted women. His motives, his reasons remain largely unknown. What we do know, however, is that his actions left a city already on edge, even more shaken. In the span of 2 days, Sydney was rocked by 2 separate but equally horrifying acts of violence. 2 days, 2 mass stabbings, 2 horrors. The first a result of mental health issues, the second, a product of religious extremism. And in their wake, a city gripped by fear, struggling to make sense of the bloodshed. 2 days, 2 horrors, a city gripped by fear. In times of crisis, leadership is tested. When the unthinkable happens, it's the response that defines us. From the ashes of chaos, the voice of the Australian Prime Minister rang clear, an echo of unity and a condemnation of violence. His words served as a beacon for a nation in turmoil, a call to stand together in the face of terror. He reminded us that it was not just about one city or one church, it was about a country united and a people determined to not let fear win. The Prime Minister's address was not just about the immediate aftermath of the attack, it was a call to action, a plea for understanding and compassion in a time of division and fear. He urged his fellow Australians to remember the values that bind them together, to reject the hatred that these attacks sought to incite, and to stand together as one nation, one people. It was a message of hope, resilience, and unity. Meanwhile, the U.S. Embassy issued a security alert, a stark reminder of the global implications of such attacks. The world was watching, and the response from the international community was swift and clear. There was a collective condemnation of the violence, a universal call for peace and unity. The international community, like Australia, stood against the forces of hatred and division. Yet, in the midst of the chaos, there was a glimmer of hope. The response from the community was overwhelming. Stories of heroism and bravery began to emerge, tales of ordinary people doing extraordinary things in the face of danger. The spirit of Sydney, of Australia, was unbroken, standing tall, refusing to be cowed by the acts of a few misguided individuals. The aftermath of the Sydney church stabbings was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. It was a story of a city, a country, and a world united in the face of adversity. It was a reminder that in our darkest hours we find our greatest strength. United in the face of terror, Sydney stands strong. But this incident is more than just a local tragedy. It's a stark reminder of a global issue that continues to challenge our societies: religious extremism and terrorism. These acts of violence are not confined to a specific location or community. They have become a worldwide concern, permeating borders and affecting lives in every corner of the globe. Religious extremism, in its various forms, has been at the root of some of the most disturbing acts of terror in recent history. It's a potent, volatile force that can distort peaceful belief systems and turn them into justifications for violence. This Sydney church stabbing, deemed a terrorist act by Australian authorities, serves as a painful reminder of the terrible toll such extremism can exact. Yet, it's imperative to remember that these acts do not define the faiths they claim to represent. In fact, they are often gross misrepresentations, betraying the fundamental principles of peace, love, and understanding that lie at the heart of most religious teachings. Now, more than ever, there is a pressing need for unity and compassion. It's easy to let fear and anger rule our reactions to such incidents. But that's exactly what these acts of terror aim to achieve: to divide us, to spread fear, to tear at the fabric of our shared humanity. We must resist this. Instead of letting these acts drive us apart, we should let them be a rallying cry for unity and understanding. We must remember that the fight against extremism is not a fight against a particular faith, but against those who manipulate faith for violent ends. It's a fight for our shared values of peace, understanding, and respect for all. It's also a fight that requires global cooperation. No country, no community can tackle this issue in isolation. It needs a unified global response, one that not only addresses the symptoms like acts of terror, but also the root causes: ignorance, intolerance, and social inequality. In the end, it's not just about Sydney, it's about humanity. It's about standing together across borders, across faiths, across differences, to say a resolute no to violence, to hate, to division. It's about affirming our shared humanity, our shared commitment to peace and understanding. It's about ensuring that love, not hate, defines our world.